the discussion this morning, and what should be an interesting discussion, as we talk pretty much everything holiday parks over the 2020 season, over this very uncertain winter, and then going into the 2021 season, and hopefully taking advantage of what we hope will be a very prosperous season in 2021. Obviously, things are a little bit up in the air at the moment, so we're not 100% sure what will happen, but that's the purpose really of the discussion, is to highlight some of the key topics. Got quite a few guests in now. I think we're pretty much ready to go. So the purpose of this webinar is really just to provide a conversational discussion on threats and opportunities facing the holiday park, campsite and self-catering sector in the Southwest as we move through these unpredictable times. So just going to introduce a few of our panelists and myself, obviously. Starting with myself, my name is Ollie Steer-Fowler. I'm the head of leisure property at Vickery Holman, and I work within the agency and general practice teams for the firm. I'm based out of Exeter, but obviously at the moment working from home, and deal with all sorts of leisure property, from hotels, holiday complexes, pubs, restaurants, campsites. My specialism though is very much holiday parks and self-catering. As for 15 years I've also been involved with running my family firm of caravan parks up and down the Southwest. We also have Amy Cater from Tozers Solicitors. Amy, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Ollie. Yes, I'm Amy Cater. I'm a partner at Tozers. I specialise in planning and site licensing and premises licensing as well. So we act for holiday and residential parks nationwide, and we're advisors to the BH&HPA. So that's it.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks. Okay, and we've then got Claire Flower and Nicola Furneaux. Is that how I pronounce your surname, Nicola? I apologise if I got it wrong.
Yes, it is, yes.
From Beverley Holidays in lovely Paynton, if you could introduce yourself, ladies.
Yes, so I'm Nicola Furneaux from Beverley Holidays. We're in Paynton, South Devon. We're 4 holiday parks that have got accommodation ranging from lodges to holiday caravans to touring, and also selling holiday homes as well. And we've also got 1 residential park.
Thanks, Nicola.
And all I can add to that is that's a picture of our camping field in my background.
Claire has already won the best background picture competition this morning, because the best I've got is a fairly tidy shelf compared to what I usually have up there, as Leslie will. So yeah, Leslie, if you could introduce yourself. We've got Leslie Anderson from Hetero Marketing, who's kindly agreed to be, what are we calling you, Leslie, our referee?
Yes, I'm refereeing today. So I use Zoom all the time, and offered to. I've worked with Vickery Holman on their PR and marketing, and we thought it would be a really good opportunity to take some of the information that Vickery Holman have and all the partnerships they have with lots of amazing people around the Southwest out into online. So we're launching this at leisure webinar. Hope it goes really well. Thank you.
This is our first one, so fingers crossed. So we also, I'll just mention, we've also got a late addition in Kev Smith, who you'll hear from later on. He'll share some of his thoughts from the perspective of a holiday home owner on a park himself, and what park operators and owners can do to take advantage of the upcoming season. So that should be really interesting. That will be after the initial Q&A session. That's a late arrival, Kev. Thanks for that. So the format for this morning will be a brief market update from myself, trying my best to summarise what has been a pretty up and down 2020, as I hope you'll all agree. That will be followed by a question and answers forum, which will loosely follow today's theme, as well as threats faced by further lockdowns heading into 2021 with Amy, Claire, Nicola and myself. That will, and sort of the undoubted opportunities that could be available further down the line for parks and self-catering operators as well. So without further ado, I'll get onto my spiel about for a market update for everybody. Hope everybody can see the screen. Can you just confirm, Leslie, all good with the screen?
We can, yes, all good.
Good stuff. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover this morning in our allocated time. So if I go through some of this too fast, then I'm fairly sure that there'll be a recording of this afterwards. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay. Yeah, so then you'll be able to view that afterwards at your leisure. Not a pun intended, is that one? So Okay. Here we go. So 2018 and 2019, those seasons were good years for the self-catering industry, and the general trend in the domestic tourism numbers has been pretty much one of steady growth. The share of people taking holidays exclusively within the UK in 2019, last season, was 8% higher than those who took holidays exclusively abroad, and that trend has been going up for quite a while. We're very lucky in this part of the world that as a region, we're amongst the most visited areas for holidays in the UK, and 2019 was no exception really. And it was a particular hotspot for staycationers. Use the right mouse here. Staycation holiday, the definition of it is a holiday spent in one's home country rather than abroad, or one spent at home involving day trips to local attractions. So historically, us Brits have been a group who like to get on a jet and see the world, but more recently, especially really in the last 10 years, as the standard and sheer choice of accommodation types has increased, more and more of us have been taking our holidays in the UK. So some quick stats, as we can see here, 46.4 million domestic holiday trips were taken in England in 2019. The number of holiday trips taken was 3% higher than that in 2018. Really, the figure was projected to rise by a further 2.9% by Visit England in 2020. So some steady, albeit unspectacular growth was forecasted for this last season that's just passed, but that has not fully materialised, obviously, because of the lockdown that we've seen, and the subsequent lockdown as well. 31.6 million domestic short breaks of 1 to 3 nights account for just over 2/3 of English holidays by volume. 14.8 million 4+ night stays were taken. So the majority of breaks are short breaks in this country. The southwest region, that is Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Bristol and Dorset, was responsible for 25% of all holiday trips taken in the UK in 2019 and 27% of the total spend. Digging slightly further down into the growing figures for UK breaks domestically, we see a move away from traditional preference for service hotel accommodation amongst domestic holidays. So we're seeing a higher proportion of self-catering bed nights as a proportion of total stays. This has been boosted by the rise of digital firms like Airbnb, Host Seasons and cottages.com, among many others. I think we've got a cottages.com representative here today. There's a quick plug for you.
Thank you.
The proportion of self-catering based holidays out of total holiday figures is the highest in the southwest region. So that shows that the area really is the king of the self-catering break. A significant trend we're noticing that is a large proportion of hoteliers now looking to develop a significant self-catering aspect to their business. So a lot of hotels who will then seek to gain planning permission in their grounds or the areas outside where they're able to take advantage of views and the extra space to put in self-catering accommodation to bolster not only their existing hotel provision, but also to take advantage of this trend. It's also interesting to note in studies undertaken by Google and Visit England that self-catering during the pandemic is being viewed as a safer option by many as well. So with the strong performances of the last couple of seasons, there were few indicators to suggest that 2020 wasn't going to be was going to be a very good year, and it was going to build on these growth trends. But of course, bang, March 2020, we've had the coronavirus pandemic, and that's landed. Leisure businesses aren't open at all until the 4th of July from the end of March. So that was getting very close to peak season. The initial lockdown period was pretty scary for everyone, as both individuals and the government adjusted to a massive shutdown in the economy almost overnight. Luckily, we've had the packages of significant help that have come through. So we've had the furlough scheme, the job retention scheme, various available grants for businesses, rates reliefs, which is a big one for us at Vickery Holman. And these have all been more than welcome. Obviously, I don't know what any business would have done without the furlough scheme in particular, which was a massive aid, because one of our biggest costs in the sector is obviously staffing. Once there was reopening though, trade across the self-catering sector has been very, very strong, with booking levels and occupancy outstripping supply in some of those areas of the southwest. I read a stat as well that said that in late June, so just after Boris made his announcement for the reopening of leisure businesses, that Ho Seasons were reporting that they were taking a booking every 11 seconds at one point, which is absolutely crazy. And I think that, it'd be interesting to hear from some of the park owners that we've got here today, what their experiences were, certainly from Claire and Nicola as well, to see what their experiences were over the summer. With occupancy and really those levels of demand, and see how that sort of reflects for the previous seasons. So moving on to the holiday park market, so the market for the sale and purchase of self-catering complexes as well as holiday parks has remained really, really strong, even throughout the 3 months of lockdown. So that is, agents in this sector are really proving to be busy. There is continued interest from corporate funds, overseas investment. That's more at the larger scale, but really it is a difficult market to enter, but there is a lot of appetite there. Parks are viewed as a robust investment asset in the alternative sector. So with they're viewed as having relatively secure long-term income streams, especially parks or groups with a high number of owner pitches and good levels of pitch fee income, where they're able to see that secure income over a number of years. At a smaller scale, prices have remained really strong, and new entrants and lifestyle operators have really looked to get into the sector and take advantage of a sector and that is really seen to be doing well and has a positive growth curve moving forward. Transaction levels have decreased compared to 2019. That's mainly due to the uncertainties brought about by the initial March lockdown, and the slowdown of the transaction process, which is a slow one anyway, but has been further exacerbated in the lockdown period over the spring. And I would say it is definitely a seller's market at the moment. The appetite from purchasers is still very much there, but the onus is really on the seller at the moment. So in terms of prices being achieved, we're seeing at present in some cases, there are unprecedented prices being achieved for prime assets at the moment. Perhaps this is due to considerable competition, very low supply levels, but they really are quite good at the moment. From our work undertaken in the sector, values for trading holiday park assets have consistently ranged between 10 and 12 times year's purchase on net adjusted profits, which is the typical way of valuing these assets, and with exceptional properties sometimes touching 14 times year's purchase. It's pretty dependent on the unit mix, the quality of the units. Most importantly, as always in this part of the world, it is about location in terms of prices being achieved. Some parks, so we're talking at the very top end of the market or in really, really exceptional locations, are actually transacting for as high as 18 to 20 times year's purchase. Oh, I've gone forward one there. So just to give you some occupied pitch ranges in terms of values at the moment. Residential park homes, we're looking, these are occupied pitches, so not development values. The pitch ranges between 20,000 a pitch to 60,000 a pitch at the high end. Static vans are 17,500 to 35,000 a pitch. And touring between 5 and 15,000. Again, it's the same sort of variables that you're looking at in terms of where values lie. It's very much down to provision of facilities, quality of pitches, quality of accommodation, and also then the location of the asset as well. Service tenanting between 2 and 6,000. Again, there's not much of a range there, purely because there's only so much you can do with a tenanting pitch. But again, it is very much linked to the location of where the park actually is. So finally, a large proportion of deals that are being done are off market. They'll not see the light of day at all. And this is perhaps a reflection really of the appetite of the purchasers at the moment. That it is such a competitive market that so few assets are actually coming. You will not see them listed on Rightmove. You will not even usually know that a property is being transacted until the deal is actually done. There's a lot of discreet marketing going on. One other thing of note that I will comment on quickly is it's noticeable the amount of activity, certainly this year and the end of last year, in the luxury lodge market. So the development for luxury lodges, sometimes on their own, in terms of a field with, you'll have a greenfield development with lodges being developed just from scratch, and it will be accommodation only, taking advantage of a particular affluent area or something like that. But then also as an addition to an existing holiday park, in order to take advantage of pitch fee levels and things like that. There's even specialist developers in this sector now, which were non-existent 5 or 6 years ago. So, when people are opening up development firms just to look to develop this type of asset, then you know that the market is going somewhere. Okay, I think that's probably enough of me talking on my own. That was my sort of very brief market update. We'll now turn our attention to our Q&A with our panelists if we can. So Leslie, do we need to do any housekeeping at this point?
No, I think we're okay. So we want to stop screen sharing and then we can see more faces on the screen.
Yeah, I will try to stop screen sharing a second.
Excellent.
Has that worked?
Yes.
Good. So okay, so we'll start with a couple of questions for Nicola and Claire. Just bear with me. So, Claire, if I could ask you the first question, if possible, just in the context of what we've just been talking about, but also just to provide a sort of general overview picture. How was the 2020 season for you at Beverley Holidays?
Well, I have to admit, at the start, it was very, very stressful indeed. It was such a crazy start to the year. We went from being open to completely closed to open again. And then when we were open, it was just absolutely crazy. Yeah. So the extremes were there, which was really hard for a team. We were fortunate to have a very good July all the way through to October. Our team were absolutely amazing, so supportive, and what we were really wowed by was the support we got from our regular customers. The amount of support, the emails, the communication from them was just absolutely wonderful. And what it really showed was good communication with both your team and your customers is just absolutely vital.
You're open 12 months a year, is that right?
We are, yes. So we were open when this all started.
Okay. And this latest lockdown then has sort of hit you quite hard, is it?
It has. We should be open now. We were really pleased to get half term in because that was one of our last sort of big revenue streams coming in was the October half term. It's quite a good earner half term. Yeah. So we're really pleased to get that one in. And then so yeah, we're closed now, but we are hoping to open up again in December.
Yeah, okay, so looking ahead, how do you feel about 2021 and possible sort of further lockdowns then?
If I can just add to that. Yeah, so 2021 at the moment, bookings are looking very strong. That is a mixture of bookings though that a lot of customers did move their holiday from this year into next year. But taking that aside, it's still looking very strong, which we're really positive about. And I think that's the key really, that we need to stay positive. And as Claire said, it's the communication with the customers and our staff, keeping that positive message going that's key.
So the booking levels in terms of 2021, there's no dip, there's not been a noticeable dip since this latest lockdown then for you, Nicola?
Well, obviously we're only not quite a week into it, so it has gone very quiet. We've just been dealing with the bookings that are booked in November at the moment and transferring their holidays or offering them a refund. A lot, up to say 99% of them are actually moving their holiday to another date or using it as a future holiday credit, which, it's really encouraging. And I think that we're very lucky to be in the sector we are with self-catering.
Yeah, well, as I was just saying in the market update, the Southwest really is is the king when it comes to self-catering in terms of the options, what avenue people decide to use as an accommodation type for their holidays. So yeah, it's really key looking forward to 2021 that we maximise what we can do. I mean, what's the most challenging thing from a Beverley Holidays perspective? What's the most challenging aspect in terms of preparing for 2021, would you say?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It's an unknown. I think that's our biggest challenge. And as Claire said, it's making sure that team morale is strong, which it is, and positive. I think another challenge is, because it's the unknown, making sure that we've got our website as accurate as possible. Not knowing what facilities we can or can't open, what restrictions we've got. I think another big challenge is on park spend. You know, with what restrictions are we going to have? Are we having the table service, the limited numbers, which I'm sure we probably will have. Just making sure that we can maximise on park spend with that, and just giving customers the confidence that we are a safe environment, a great holiday destination to do, and that we can try and keep it as safe as we can.
Yeah, I think the sector is at an advantage. I did mention it very briefly in the market update, actually, that we're at an advantage that caravans and lodges, because of the nature of the actual aspect of the property being 6 meters apart, self-contained, has really also helped people get over the certain anxiety about traveling within the UK at the moment in such a. Have you had that sort of feedback from your customers?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think even with the touring caravans as well, a lot of them have all got on board facilities. So I think, you know, they were using those, but also happy to be using our shared shower facilities, because we had lots of measures put in place. So I think there was confidence there in using these facilities.
Yeah.
And I think that showed, especially in October half term, when the weather was pretty awful. I think it probably rained every day.
Yeah, typical half term.
Yeah, our restaurants and entertainment complex, every day and evening, all the tables were booked. So there was definitely the demand. People were wanting to use the facility, which is encouraging.
That is encouraging to hear. I will just say at this point that if anybody's got any questions for any of the panelists or myself or Leslie, that they put it into the chat. I'm here trying to work out how to open the chat when I've got because I'm not used to having the admin rule. But if Leslie can flag any questions up, that'd be great. So feel free to put some questions in the chat and we'll try to get to them. What I was going to say, Claire and Nicola, was, have you, in terms of looking towards 2021, you've had every year, every park that I speak to is striving to improve their product. They're trying to, whether it be through planning gain and then putting new units on, improving their units and the mix of units that they've got, and the quality, the standard of caravans, so putting a new set of fleet on or whatever. How is the 2 lockdowns now as it is, how has that actually affected your plans in terms of spending for next year?
It has affected it quite a bit because of the uncertainty with your revenue. You've really got to make sure you cut on your costs and you're tight. And there's only so many areas that you can cut your costs on. But you've got to get the balance, because we do pride ourselves on having a very good, high quality product. And if you miss a year and not spending to do all your refurbs, your upgrades, you buy your new units, you do come behind. So we are going to be very careful this year, but we're going to make sure that we can continue with in some form, just to make sure our product, has got a very good offering still.
Sure. No, that's. I mean, it is interesting that what's the proportion of your so the total number of units on your 3 parks? What's the proportion of fleet to owner bases ish? You probably not. If you know it off by heart, you're doing better than me.
So we've got we're more or less 50-50 now for holiday home rental fleet and our privately owned. One of the biggest challenges that we have, which I'm sure lots of other holiday parks will relate to this, that we're actually struggling finding or buying any new holiday caravan stock. So if you wanted to be changing a big proportion of your fleet, you're not able to do it this year.
No, I think Willoughby are the big caravan manufacturers. stacked out till middle of next year, aren't they? I think.
Yeah.
It's pretty tight at the moment. Okay, that is interesting. Thanks for that. Okay, I'm going to ask a couple of questions now to Amy, if possible, just from a planning and development aspect, and then I'll bring in Kev for a couple of minutes, if possible. Have we got any? Leslie, I'm struggling to see the chat. Have we got any questions in the chat to begin with?
Ollie?
Yeah.
Leslie's put a message in saying the fire alarms are going off in her office building, so she's had to vacate the building. So
that's gone well. That's gone well.
Just to let you know that she's abandoned you within 20 minutes. That's good going, I reckon.
Oh, thanks.
There's a message on the chat thing from Robin Barker asking about saying COVID assurance accreditation is going to be key next year, especially if targeting older or more vulnerable groups. And apparently kind of feeling that the messages from the tourism businesses are falling a long way short, I think perhaps to convince people that it's safe to go on holiday within the UK. So maybe kind of a few thoughts on that.
Yeah, Claire and Nicola, do you have anything? I mean, what sort of, obviously you've spoken already about what you've put in place for 2021 and also this past season in terms of COVID assurance and accreditation, but is that something that you've obviously got your eye keenly on for next season in terms of boosting people's confidence levels? We've already spoken a little bit about the self-catering units themselves in terms of being spaced apart, but accreditation is going to be key, as Robin says.
Certainly it is. We've accredited ourselves to the, I think it's called Good to Go. I can't remember all the names. I think that's the one. So we've got that all over our website. We've been putting it out on our social media. And that's been one of our main strategies of marketing this year and going into next year, is going to be all about the accreditation, making sure that we explain on our website exactly what we're doing, how we can promote that safety feel, and a lot of our marketing has been based around fresh air, open air outside, and that sort of thing, with all our different like pictures and imagery.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's great. Okay, let's bring in Amy. Amy, so from a planning and development perspective, what have been the biggest themes over the last, say, season and a bit in terms of holiday park planning? What are the general trends you're seeing in the sector?
Well, actually, so in July we had the written ministerial statement from Robert Jenrick saying that local councils should use in their enforcement powers very lightly and allow parks to operate in the closed season. So by essentially varying their planning conditions if they were closed. And so that was interesting. We had a flurry of inquiries about that, because what he was saying was local authorities, they don't have to take enforcement action. They should work proactively with the parks. And so what we were finding with clients, they would go to the local authority, they would say, can we operate in the winter? We've got people who want to come to us, and local authorities were saying, we don't have the resources, we're not going to say whether we can enforce or not. So you're going to have to make a planning application. So this, although we had all this great government support, in reality it wasn't coming to much at all. So a lot of parks were saying, well, what is the point of making an application, because there are risks, we're going to have to put in a flood risk assessment, we're going to have to carry out an ecological survey. So it just, it didn't materialise the support that was meant to be coming in. So instead, what we found is that parks have come to us to carry out reviews of their existing planning permissions. So because a lot of the parks obviously are old, their planning permissions will be, sometimes they go back to the 1960s or even earlier.
The famous red line.
And so actually some of the parks who thought that they couldn't operate in the winter, they could. And so, if they can apply for a certificate of lawfulness instead, that would mean that they could, there's no risk of enforcement action. Because of course the situation was that parks would say, well, why would we want to take the risk? The council may or may not take enforcement action if we open. And there's also the risk, of course, of site licensing issues if they're in breach of a site license condition saying that they can't operate. So, actually the reviews of planning permissions seems to be the better way. And it's, providing a lot of parks with opportunities that they didn't necessarily know were there before.
Yeah, and do you find that it's been a case of this season, people are just now, in the light of what Claire and Nicola were just saying, in terms of, you're not going to be going out and spending an enormous amount on development at the moment, maybe because of what's happened this year. Do you find it's just a case of people getting their ducks in order now, planning wise?
Yeah, absolutely, that's right, Ollie. So I think in the closed period, during lockdown, people were just saying, well, let's look at our paperwork, pulling out reams and reams of permissions and old site licenses and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's right.
And is that, has this year differed massively then from previous seasons that you've seen?
I mean, we always do this. This is a course of part of our work, but yeah, I think there's definitely more of it this season. I think people, parks have had more time to look at it, and as I say, the government, the support that was supposedly there hasn't really been there. So can everyone hear me? It says my connection is unstable. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Everybody else? I'm getting a lot of thumbs up on the screen, Amy, so it seems to be good. That's interesting what you say about the extension of, when Robert Jenrick came out and said the extension for park operating seasons. I think everybody was jumping for joy, thinking, well, now we can operate over Christmas through the winter. To sort of claw, it's all been a balancing act of trying to claw back as much revenue that was lost from the closure in the spring as possible. But it's interesting when you say that hasn't actually really materialized. Do you feel that with 2021 in mind, has this new lockdown, have you had any clients that have been potentially lining up now to do some planning work, to do some development work in 2021, and have now pulled the plug on that with this new lockdown?
No, not at all. Again, people are coming to us to improve their planning situation. It's sort of getting, picking the low-hanging fruit really, and seeing it again as a good opportunity, and looking at, if they can't go down the certificate of lawfulness route, making planning applications. I mean, there's so much uncertainty with the planning system at the moment, as you all know. There's the white paper, and local authorities are massively under-resourced, and so who knows what's going to happen. But I think people are just working for here and now. Let's try and make the most of what we've got. And
that's
so
interesting. It's really a balance between wanting to get planning permissions lined up so that you can develop and move your parks forward. As Claire and Nicola said before, people are constantly striving to improve their product, to improve their assets, as well as obviously the experience for the customer. But I think that it sounds as though there's just a sort of a break on things at the moment, really just to wait to see where things fall in the early part of 2021, to see whether people can actually go out and act on any of these permissions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other thing, people are looking at golf courses. I don't know whether you found that, Ollie, but I've seen a number of new permissions for in this area actually for high-end lodges on golf courses, and that seems to be the way things are going as well.
Is that standalone golf courses or hotels with golf courses? More a resort?
I think more with a hotel, but both really.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've seen a lot of, as I said in the market update, I've seen a lot of hotels adding self-catering to their portfolio because of the pure demand for the self-catering sector at the moment and for that type of accommodation. But it's interesting to hear that there are actually golf courses. I mean, I've seen a few, but golf courses are obviously, not every golf course is particularly successful. They're difficult businesses to run. And it's similar to farm diversification. It's trying to maximize what you've got on the ground, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Okay, thanks for that, Amy. Kev, if I could bring you in, just to give us a little bit of a few of your thoughts from an owner on a park, as you are yourself, towards what you think parks could sort of maximize and do for the 2021 season looking forward.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Oliver. And just to give a bit of background who I am, Kev Smith. The day job I actually work for WorldPay, so I'm implementing some of these payment systems. speaking to Leslie last week. We were just talking about how the park though, so I've been an owner now for 2 years, family of 6, so 3-year-old, 12, 14 and 15, so we cover kind of the spectrum, just talking about some of the bits that we saw as owners from our perspective of being on the park, but also some feedback we had from our guests. I would stress that actually that the site that we stayed on, or we had the holiday place on, is safe, secure, socially distanced. They implemented procedures and processes faultlessly. Communications were timely, detailed, so we had enough information personally to also for our own use, but also to share with our guests. So what I'm looking at really to share now is just kind of some thoughts around why we didn't spend on site, because there are some bits to why we didn't, why we did spend on site, and then also actually how we could have spent a little bit more. And I know in a perfect world running up to this, you know, we would have all liked to be fully planned and prepared. Life sometimes takes us down different courses and we can't always plan. So this isn't about being overcritical on the park. This is in the spirit of taking and reflecting on what happened in 2020, but then also looking at how we can then change things in 2021. So for us, you know, reasons why we wouldn't have spent on the park, or we didn't spend on the park, was really queues and waiting. With a 3-year-old sitting and waiting just really wasn't an option. So previous years we would have probably ended the day with a couple of drinks in the bar. We couldn't have done that this year. That was really a challenge for us. Just kind of graining and holding a 3-year-old down to sit down and wait patiently just didn't make a pleasurable experience for anyone. As measures developed and entertainment moved outside, what we found was we kind of changed and adapted what we did. So we did, instead of the drinks at the bar, we brought our own drinks and we had our drinks outside. As the entertainment changed, we didn't see any of the kind of bringing the revenue the park could have generated outside. And what we did notice was more and more people kind of doing a similar thing to what we were doing, was bringing their own kind of takeaway. The site did offer a takeaway and click and collect. However, while we used it a little bit, it was kind of very restrictive in slots, and you had to be kind of planned quite well in advance in order to take advantage of that. Also, I think a big spend for us, the site is blessed to have a beach, kind of beach goers when the sun will allow it. We're very forgetful with quite a large family, so we quite often forgot to take masks down with us, which means we had to make alternative arrangements for things like ice creams and drinks on the beach. We couldn't utilise the shop down on the park as much as what we did previous years. And you know, for a 3-year-old, an ice cream on the beach is a very big deal. So we had to kind of come up with our own arrangements for that one. Well, we think that the shop probably enjoyed, so the on-site shop enjoyed a kind of a boost in revenue and kind of people walking through. It did only have 2 positions. So what that meant is that the checkouts were either queued, so you'd spend a lot of time queuing. So again, we made our own arrangements. So we were finding that we were bringing a lot more stuff down with us rather than relying on the facilities on site. That also changed our stays as well. So instead of going down for the whole week, we were coming down for 3 or 4 nights only. So we weren't coming down. We weren't kind of staying on site and using the facilities as much. When we did spend though, so when we planned, we found click and collect worked really well. So for us, it just took that unknown element and just made it really easy. And when we found a slot that worked for us, we would actually spend more. So we knew that we weren't going to do maybe the portion of chips to go along with a meal. Actually, we were just going to dive bomb in there and have the whole thing. We were going to put full advantage of having that slot. Later on in the season, as lockdown restrictions became a little bit easier, we lent on the grandparents to kind of encourage them to spend a bit of time with their grandchildren. So we managed to have a couple of weekends away ourselves. I would say the mobile ordering app was absolutely perfect. We on the occasions we went in there, we perfectly timed when the drinks would arrive. So you didn't have any of this queuing, so none of this you know, someone's got to get up and do the ordering or anything like that, we could actually get halfway through a drink, and before we had finished the first round or that round, we had our next ones coming in. And we quite enjoyed those weekends when we had that time away. Definitely spent too much. As a result, actually had breakfast most of the times the next day as well, because we really wasn't ready to be cooking or anything like that. So there were some definite some advantages on that, and when we spent a little bit more. How we could have spent more. So as a result, our habits changed. What we noticed as well was the people coming on or wanting to book through, so the owners forum, that changed as well. So traditionally they were a 7-day stay, and everyone was kind of locked in. No, we wanted to stay 7 days. We saw a little bit of a gap in the market, and we just started bringing people in for the very three or four midweek days, and we were able to hold quite a premium price for that as well. So rather than someone coming in for, you know, Monday to Thursday, having to spend for 7 days and then letting the outside days go, we just charged slightly higher, so they came in them for just the days that they required. As a result, it kind of meant we had a little bit more surplus cash kind of floating around. So really just I got 7 kind of points of how we could have been encouraged to spend a little bit more. Point number 1, mobile ordering. That's fantastic. It was inside. We wanted mobile ordering outside as well, especially when the entertainment moved outside. That for us would have been perfect. Click and collect. Like I said, on the beach, we couldn't really use the outside cafe because we were really bad at taking masks down. A click and collect system on the beach would have completely overcome that, and we would have been able to spend a lot more. The shop only having 2 positions, we would have liked to click and collect in the shop as well, which would have been quite simple to implement, and would have meant that we could have just picked up what we needed as and when we needed it, probably stayed longer and spent more as well. The click and collect service in the takeaway, while it was good, you kind of had to pre-plan your slot. And it was a system that you maybe only had 10 slots in one session, so it didn't matter what the customer was ordering. So it could have been a portion of chips, it would have knocked out that slot, so no one else. So there was no maximization of revenue, and we know that there are apps out there that will maximize that order. So if it's just ordering one portion of chips, it's not going to knock that slot out. We'll be like, look, we can deal with that, and then we can have another bit. So I think they could have looked into how that click and collect worked. Better still, this was something that all of the owners leading up to the reopening, all the owners were getting really excited about delivery to the caravan, and they were really there was quite a lot of noise of coming around of, actually, does that mean that we can have our food now brought to our caravan, which will take out a lot of hassle and inconvenience, plus reduce the controls of people walking around the site going to the takeaway venues as well. Delivery and click or collect option at the main restaurant. They only had the takeaway with the click and collect. We think they could have done that on the main restaurant, which offered a different variety of food. 2 of our children are vegans. The takeaway didn't cater for vegans at all, where the main restaurant did. We couldn't go in the restaurant, so they kind of lost out on that revenue from there. And I suppose our final point was, when we did get into the restaurant, front of house is so important. You know, we were put off quite a few times about going in because of the queues just to get through front of house. And had that been a lot slicker, once you're in, you're going to do your mobile ordering, so all the ordering takes place really quickly and easily. So that front of house really needs to be quite slick to encourage the customer to come in. What I would say about all of these points, they are all possible, and they will work pre and post COVID as well. So it's not just for COVID that people want to do those things. So there we go. So that's just kind of my thoughts of our spend. Hope it helps.
Thanks, Kev. That's some, for the park owners we've got here especially, there's some really useful insights on the ground there. Thanks for that. I actually cannot tell you how many times personally I've forgotten my mask as well, so I can feel you on that one. So I'm constantly just turning up to a shop and then having to walk back to a car for 10 minutes, and then it's terrible. Yeah. I think is one thing I picked up on as well is Leslie said it in the chat here actually further down, is we're all getting used to using our mobiles to order and pay remotely. The one thing really that has certainly come out from from a booking perspective, and then from a payment on park perspective, is contactless and remote payments now are becoming a huge issue.
Definitely.
And really everybody, whether you're a cottage, where you've got a self-catering complex, or you've got a 500 unit holiday park with a massive amount of facilities, everybody should be looking at making the customer experience now as free flowing and easy as possible. Moving forward, that's COVID and then post-COVID as well, because that will be the world that we will expect to walk into when we are free of restrictions further down the line. I did see one comment from Heidi. Heidi, where it doesn't say where you're from, Heidi, but I will read.
Wi-Fi.
Thank you very much.
Heidi's from Club Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi. We work with over 250 parks and businesses across the southwest. This year, I would agree that they have had a better than expected season. Many, like Beverley, have looked at different ways to communicate with customers while they are on site with APPs, and this has really helped with pool bookings, table bookings, restaurants, etc. We have seen a huge increase on people working from sites, and using Zoom, etc. And think that this will all increase next year. Park owners are having to look at systems and procedures in a different way to help their customers stay safe and have an enjoyable holiday. Yeah, and again, these things will cross over into next year after post-COVID as well.
It'd be quite interesting to hear from some of the holiday rentals that we've got in the room, as it were, as well. So I don't know if Susie, if you want to say anything about what's happening with the holiday rentals side of the industry.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just sending out some emails now actually to some new owners, and I've got some key stats here which might be of interest. So we've seen really high occupancy levels for next year, with Easter already being 21% occupied compared to 10% last year.
Wow.
This time last year, sorry. So May half term is already 25% occupied compared to 8% this time last year. And the peak summer holidays are already 12% occupied. So overall, we've seen bookings are up by 68%, and post-lockdown, we've seen record booking numbers, one booking taken every 8 seconds.
Wow.
That's beaten my 11-second stat.
Yeah, I think
That's
that was
amazing.
Hose Seasons. That's our sister company, actually. So we've seen.
Have you seen a drop off at all since the current lockdown with bookings for next year? Has that sort of dampened people's attitudes?
Yeah, they have. It's gone down a little bit since last week, but it's I think a lot of people are thinking, well, we're not booking to go abroad at the moment. Let's book to stay in the UK just to be on the safe side. But yeah, it has definitely been a mad few months since the 4th of July. It's been non-stop, really. So.
Are you seeing any kind of trends? This is to anybody in the industry. Trends in terms of how much people are prepared to spend compared to what maybe they would have spent before COVID or before lockdown on UK holidays?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So yeah, basically the rates have been extremely high. We've got this dynamic pricing system where it yields the rates 20% up or down.
Right.
We've pretty much seen the higher tier at the top 20%, kind of being booked. The summer was just snapped up as soon as a booking cancelled. Within a few minutes, another one would come in. So
extraordinary times.
It's good. It's encouraging to hear that, really, considering how up and down 2020 has been, that there's those sorts of levels looking towards 2021. I think there is inevitably going to be a bit of a lockdown, a bit of a slowdown, Susie, with bookings for next year with this current lockdown. Hopefully it doesn't last for too long, and then that trend will pick up again for next year. But it's going to become really a supply issue, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. So trying to get new properties on board at the moment is key, because we can definitely see next year's going to have a real staycation boom. So it's all about getting the properties on now as soon as possible, so we can get the professional photography done and get it all looking as good as it can do. So, and
I think from across the spectrum, from a park's perspective as well, from what Claire and Nicola were saying earlier, because of the season that we've had with the reductions in revenue in 2020, people are going to want to maximize what they've got on the ground in terms of availability for next year, but they're sort of having to hold back at the moment, not really knowing when the current lockdown is going to end. Are we going to be able to spend the money? Is that sort of the right sentiment, Claire? Is that where you guys are sort of placing yourself at the moment? Because from what Susie's saying, the demand for next year is absolutely crazy, but we're not really able to do, we're not really able to take advantage. You're not really in a position to take advantage of it fully at the moment because of this current lockdown. Is that right? Oh, you're muted, Claire. Sorry.
There we go. Sorry. We've just been comparing our 2021 figures with 2019, actually, just to give us a bit more of an idea of where we're at with our booking trends. Because a lot of our customers from 2020 have moved their booking across to 21, so it has swayed the stats. But when we compare our figures to 2019 and take those away, we are up on where we were 2019, so that's really, really promising. And I think one of the big things is we need to take advantage of the fact that people do need something to look forward to. They're at home now. We're going to a long, dark, dingy winter. And I think they need to have a little bit of brightness to look forward to. And so we're making sure that we monopolise on that, take advantage of the different opportunities. We've got Black Friday coming up. At Christmas time, whether the family are actually together or digitally together, there are going to be wanting to plan holidays and that sort of thing. So we're just trying to make sure that we take advantage of the opportunities that are out there, really.
Yeah, that's true. Amy's just put a very interesting point across, which is, and this is one really for anybody to come in on, is do we think a vaccine will change attitudes? What are your thoughts, actually, Amy, on that one? In terms of, do you think that will? Personally, I think that again, there's a lot of speculation about this. The vaccine was obviously only announced yesterday evening and brought to people's attention. And Boris was very, very keen to come forward and actually say, look, we are not promising the world here in terms of first its efficacy, but also moving forward, we don't know when this is going to actually become live on the ground.
I think that's right, and we don't know how long it's going to take for it to be rolled out. I was just wondering, really, so I think for next year, people will still want to be having staycations, but just wondering really for the following year, whether people will feel more free to travel abroad and whether that will hit the industry that way. Possibility, I suppose, but I think if parks are looking at, or not just parks, but the tourist industry generally are looking at improving what they've got, then people have become used to staying within the UK, weather permitting. Then perhaps this trend will continue, which would be a good thing.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to see. I think we had this conversation very briefly before we started the webinar. It will be interesting to see really when this actually becomes live and people are actually being given this vaccine, and how quickly then that opens up people's freedoms essentially and how quickly things will return to normal, if at all, this year. We don't really know where the year's going to go, do we? But I saw another comment on there, actually.
That's an interesting comment that Claire's just put about digital training. Is that you mean for staff, or do you mean for your guests as well?
Both, to be honest. Our staffing team, especially the likes of waiters and waitresses and chefs, they certainly don't use digitalisation much in their general day-to-day, or they didn't. They do now. Right. We brought in an online table booking software, Open Table, we started using. So every single customer in the restaurants had to book online, and if they were walk-ins, they still had to be put onto the booking software system, and it has been a challenge. Not everybody is into that, so that's both the staff and customers and our reception team. Some of them are not the most savvy, but they've been bombarded with digital questions from our customers who can't download the app. They've not been able to book a swimming session, so it's been quite a learning curve for everybody, and a lot of our team have really struggled with it, and it's something that we need to be aware of and look at next year.
It's going to be the front end of things, that, Claire, isn't it? Especially with what Kev's just said about digitalizing everything, smoothing out the process. for customers on sites, whether that be at the booking stage, or on park, and actually having the things delivered where you can order on your phone, contactless payments everywhere. People don't really have that that tech background at the moment. It's going to need to be instilled in businesses pretty quickly, isn't it?
Yeah. I suppose that's where the independents might struggle a bit more, because they don't have the IT departments, and they haven't got the economies of scale. If you're one park, for example, trying to go completely digital, it's much harder than if you're one of 10 or 20 parks.
Yeah.
I would say, though, that the cost of this technology is reduced greatly. So a few years ago, where it was deemed quite expensive, there's relatively simple and cost-efficient solutions that can be put in.
Interesting.
Ollie, if there's time, Robin asked an interesting question, which I think relates to both the discussions we've had around surviving why revenue streams aren't coming in, but also in terms of some of the considerations around development and planning. And it was in relation to bank funding, or finance, not just banks. I guess there's third emerging finances out there, but general funding lines in terms of both some of the emergency funding that was made available through central government, but also just general bank appetite. With my background, it'd be particularly interesting to see what the vibe is from those attendees in the sector as to banks' approach to support.
Yeah, does anybody have any? I've got a little bit of personal feedback on that one, but does anybody else have any feedback in the group from that?
I just follow on with my comment in that across all sectors across the Southwest, there's been an increasing amount of feedback, particularly in the last month, that the mainstream banks are pulling out of support of many tourism businesses. Now, I suspect that holiday parks are fairly immune to that, because as we've just been talking about, there is clearly the demand, and big rural areas, lots of social spacing and so on, are on a roll. But when we talk about the Southwest, Devon, Cornwall, rural Somerset, rural Dorset should be able to benefit from that. Urban Bristol, urban Bath, definitely not. And city hotels and so on, and hotel developments in those cities, the feedback we've had is that the banks are saying, no, this is no longer something we want to be helping with. And they are finding it enormously hard to get access to money. Can I just add in, I made a couple of comments on the chat about the demographics. Of course, it's very easy to talk about customers, but all the research this summer shows that there is a huge difference between the assurance needed and the communications with a 20-year-old who is bulletproof and COVID-proof and will never catch anything and will live forever, and older people or people with pre-existing conditions who need an enormously higher level of assurance before they book anywhere or go anywhere or go and stand in a queue and so on. And that assurance factor, which Claire picked up on, is increasingly important. And certainly we've seen some tourism businesses that don't put anything about security and safety on their websites. Some who, like Claire, are going with the Good to Go scheme, which is self-completion but doesn't actually have any verification, through to some that have really bitten the bullet and gone the extra mile in demonstrating everything with videos showing exactly what it is that they're doing to make a visit safe. And I think we're going to see an enormous amount more of that over the winter too.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. That's interesting. It is interesting as well to see from a demographic perspective how people will, how parks and also cottages can react to that next year, because you would have thought that the older demographic will be the slowest to come out of any restrictions brought about by COVID-19. And people might just not be set up to aim their businesses at the 20-somethings of this world to take advantage of the fact that the second a lockdown is not around, it may be, a mass exodus to the countryside. And are you set up and geared up with facilities on park, or are you targeting that demographic through your Google ad campaigns or whatever at the moment? There's a number of ways of looking at it. What I would say from the funding question that yourself and Alex put is, from a holiday park perspective, my personal experience is that the banks are extremely supportive of that sector at the moment. But I certainly do, and it's interesting that you raised the point that that is not tourism wide at the moment.
Yeah, Ollie, as a day-to-day valuer, you know, having worked through the credit crunch, yes, back then we saw the banks disappear big time from the leisure market. Some of them kept going throughout, and I think it's the same case now. So I agree with Robin. I think if if those businesses which have seen the immediate drop off in customers, so restaurants, cafes, hotels, etc., I think a lot of those are struggling. So I think they're unlikely to shift banks at the moment. I think if the bank is supporting them, that's fine. So I think you've got a two-tier market. You've got those clients and businesses with an existing bank and which they're hopefully happy with, and it will support them, because it's not going to be good press to see a bank step away from a business at this time. But I think, yeah, a new business or a business that was looking at changing banks, that's just not going to be something you can do at the moment, because a lot of the banks, if you're a new business going to them for lending or to change your accounts to them, you're going to have to be a pretty impressive operator to do that. I think the other thing I'd say is that what we've seen in the past is that when markets go through big sudden changes, which I think the leisure market is in the way you're operating through much of what you've talked about so far, we often see from the valuer's perspective a real shift in levels. So whereas you turn up to a 3-star hotel and it might be kind of 3/4 stars, if they haven't made the changes that we're talking about now in terms of the electronic devices and the ordering systems, you'll now go in, because of course we see the wider Southwest market, you'll go in and go, well, I'm really sorry, but you may be kind of 2/3 stars at the moment, because your bookings are down, the occupancy rates aren't recovering. That it can be sometimes, you often find that they get a bit not pigeonholed, but they don't really look up and see what the others are doing. They're so busy fighting to keep themselves going that they're not really taking advantage of some of these things which are out there, which could actually help get people back into their business and get the numbers back up again. And before you know it, 3 months, 6 months have passed, and they've almost kind of started falling behind where the market is.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. That's interesting, because I think that's one of the main things to come out of this talk, and I hope it's been useful for people, is that you've got to try to be at the cutting edge of things. It's such a competitive market that you will need to be at the try to be as progressive as possible in terms of your reaching out to customers in the future. I've just read Nicola's put a quite pertinent point. Is I deal with business rates for the leisure sector here at Vickery Holman. Just something to be mindful of regarding business rates. We have, of course, seen the 2021 revaluation postponed to 2023. The revaluation will be based on values and trade 2 years prior. So the key season feeding into that reval will be the season we've just had. It will be interesting to see how that filters through into rateable values and whether we will see increases or decreases or static rateable values in 2023 and beyond. Thanks for that, Nicola. It is obviously not, in terms of rateable values at the moment, we've got the reliefs in place across the leisure sector. So it's not the hottest topic at the moment, but as Nicola points out there, down the line, it will certainly become a hot topic again when the reliefs wear off. And we've certainly seen a lot of people looking to their existing assessments in terms of backdating those for any potential savings there for businesses. So thanks for bringing that up, Nicola.
I'm really conscious that we've just gone over our 11 o'clock time. So, if you'd like to finish off, Ollie, wrap up.
We'll probably thank you for the other questions in the chat, because it's an interesting discussion, and an hour is really never enough. But we are out of time. I'd just really like to thank our panelists, so Amy from Tozers Solicitors and her colleague Alex, who briefly came on to ask a question today. He's been doing a lot of work in the background for this. Claire and Nicola from Beverley Holidays, thank you very much to yourselves for giving up their time and providing their insight. To Kev Smith as well, thanks for that, Kev, for your insight on the ground there. And I'd also like you, Leslie, as well, for helping to organise the webinar and the invitations and everything else in between.
You're welcome.
Thanks for everybody for their contributions. I hope it was a useful discussion for people. There will be a recording of the webinar available shortly afterwards. If you've got any colleagues or people that you think this would benefit, then please feel free to pop me an email. I think I've put my So I will.
Or you can reply to your confirmation for today, and I'll send it out to you as well. So as Ollie said at the beginning, those of you that may have missed it, this is the first in the series. So we'll be taking various themes and topics, hopefully one a month certainly through the winter. And the next one, Ollie, is looking at hotels. Are we looking at hotels next?
Yeah, so the next leisure webinar at Leisure Webinar is 10th of December at 10 a.m, which will be focusing on the hotel sector with myself and Tom Roach from Francis Clark, and
Mark Godfrey from Deer Park, who's going to share some of his ideas about how he moved Deer Park from being a hotel into an exclusive wedding venue.
That's exactly a month from now, 10th of December, 10 a.m.
Yep.
Hopefully some of you can make it, and if you've got colleagues in the hotel sector, then please do point them in that direction, but there'll be an invite going out across our usual channels. But thank you very much for coming, everyone, and have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.